You know, the Christian life a lot of times is like a roller coaster. We have our ups, we have our downs. And you may be finding yourself today in a down place, a down spot, where you're in need of a fresh encounter with God. Moses understood what it meant to have a real fresh encounter with the living God. In the book of Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, we read, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not near to this place, put off your shoes from off of your feet, for the place whereon you stand is holy ground. Moreover, I am the God of Abraham, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt. I have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land into a land large, to a land that is flowing with milk and honey, to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. A fresh encounter with God. Moses understood in this experience what that meant. God prepares us many times for these fresh encounters, just as he had prepared Moses. Sometimes we experience times of isolation, desolation, and desperation. Moses was on the backside of the desert, feeling like all hope had lost, feeling like his destiny and the world was gone. He was isolated, alone. He was in a desolate place, barren, and he was desperate. You may find yourself in such a place today. In fact, if you do, you're in a great position for a fresh encounter with God. But when God saw Moses, God confronted him. And he confronted him in a very unusual way. He manifested himself in a way that was unique. It had never been done before, and it hadn't been done since. It was a unique, specially designed way for God to encounter Moses. There were no more burning bushes. God would encounter Joshua later on. He would encounter Peter. He would encounter Paul. He would encounter Elijah. He would encounter Ezekiel. He would encounter each of these guys. But each one had a unique encounter specifically designed for them. And in this encounter, God came by means of a burning bush. Now, Moses had seen bushes burn before, but they burned. This one wasn't burning. And so he wanted to investigate. I'm going to turn aside and I'm going to see this great sight. Our desperation factor will determine how hard and how passionately we'll turn away from where we are to begin to pursue God. Moses was desperate and he wanted to see what was going on. God used this as a means by which to draw him to himself. And when Moses came to this bush, God revealed himself to him. He told him he was the God of his fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Later on he would tell him, I am who I am. I am that I am. God revealed himself to Moses. There was confrontation, revelation in that confrontation, which led to Moses worshiping God. Moses saw God in a fresh way, like he'd never seen God before. And it changed him. It transformed him. And God invited Moses into a new adventure, just like when he encounters us, he will invite us into a new adventure. He wanted to send Moses down to deliver his people because he had heard their cry. The question is, just like Moses, when God invites us into what he's calling us to, will we go? Will we be obedient? Will we step out in faith, even though the way may be fraught with danger, toils and snares, as the hymn says? Will we step out on that amazing grace and that amazing call, that amazing gift into that special place that God has prepared for us, that is the result of our fresh encounter with him? Or will we make excuses and run away? Well, we think, I'm too inadequate. I can't do that. That's impossible. I don't see how that could ever happen. Will we just turn away and miss an exciting event, an exciting adventure that God is calling us into out of the context of this fresh encounter? Our response to God in the midst of a fresh encounter will not only impact us, but it will impact other people as well. Moses' obedience impacted a whole nation. The result of his willingness, even though he went with fear and trepidation, even though he did that, he stepped out in faith and he looked to him who was unseen, trusted him, and he went, and it impacted several million people, even to this day. You and I, as we obey God and we step out into His call for our life, and out of the context of a fresh encounter with Him, something new He may be calling us into, will not only impact us, but we don't know the far-reaching impact in other people's lives that it will have as we obey Him in the context and as a result of a fresh encounter with the living God. I encourage you today, let your desperation factor drive you to pursue Him with all your heart. And God said, if you seek me with all your heart, you shall surely find me. Spend some time today pursuing Him who is smiling upon you with great joy.